Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit podcast. I am your host, Mark Hasera, and for over 60 years, my passion has been aviation. I love everything about airplanes. Ever since I was a 5-year-old kid standing on Grandpa Andy's hood at the end of the runways at Los Angeles International Airport, I have wanted to fly airplanes. And for 25 years, I was a KC-135 pilot in the United States Air Force. On the Lessons from the Cockpit show, we talk to some of the most fascinating and interesting pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and aircraft enthusiasts from all over the world. This is our chance to hear their story, but more importantly, what did they learn from these extraordinary and extreme military, commercial, and even private aviation operations? Our purpose is to find out, how does the aviation world work? More importantly, increase critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. This episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show is brought to you by Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit, found on Amazon in all 4 formats: hardback, softback, Audible, and Kindle. Tanker Pilot gives readers a behind-the-scenes look at air refueling operations all over the world, particularly during Desert Storm, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and the Iraqi air campaigns. And book sales finances the Lessons from the Cockpit show. The book also includes 32 pictures taken during the events that are talked about and discussed in the book. Today, I want to talk to you about what I tell everybody is probably the worst 4 years of my career, but yet the most rewarding at the same time. Looking back at this time period 20 years later now, I got to be a part of something that truly made a huge difference in the aviation community and particularly the Air Force's air refueling community. And it all started with a reassignment at AMC headquarters, moving from one floor to the next. So grab an adult beverage of your choice, sit down, strap in, and let's begin the Lessons from the Cockpit show and talk about the mobile school at Fairchild Air Force Base. I had 2 phones up to my ears, my head down, looking at my computer and a Form 57, trying to figure out how we were going to get this cargo plane with this very high priority cargo on board to move. The C-5s have been notorious for maintenance issues, and there's a lot of systems in the airplane. Imaginably, they break. And I'm trying to figure out how to keep this cargo moving and literally have like Diego Garcia on one phone and Yokota on the other phone, both of them up to my ears, when I see this hand come down in front of me from over the top of where I was working. I looked up, saw who it was, and said to both of the organizations on each phone, "I'll call you back. I'll call you right back," and hung up. Standing up and taking the hand for a handshake, I said, "What can I do for you, sir?" Standing in front of me was the Tanker Airlift Control Center commander, then Brigadier General Bill Welser. And he had a big smile on his face. So obviously I'm wondering, okay, am I in trouble? And he just says, "Hey, congratulations. You have been chosen to become the new chief of tanker tactics for Air Mobility Command." I had applied for this position about 30 days prior with a big package that I put together, and General Welser told me, he says, "Mark, there's nobody in this building that has the kind of tanker experience you do." I was euphoric. What a great job to go and visit all of the tanker units around Air Mobility Command and see how they're doing tactics-wise. And so I was really looking forward to this particular position, this job up on the 3rd floor, working for Lieutenant General Gary Velger, who was at that time the AMC DO. He had come over from the fighter world and was doing like an exchange in AMC headquarters as the DO of AMC, Deputy Commander of Operations. I think it was 2 days later, I walked upstairs to my new office and where I would be. Got to meet Colonel Swanson. He showed me my desk and it had a pile of manila folders on it, but one of them was about twice as thick as the other ones. Whenever you go into a new job and you see a manila folder that is 2 to 3 inches tall on your desk, run. Run as fast as you can. Little did I realize what was in that folder. Well, 2 weeks later, I made the transition to moving from the TACC on the second floor to the Chief of Tanker Tactics for Air Mobility Command on the third floor, working for Colonel Swanson, who worked for General Velger. Now, it's important for you to remember, General Velger, Gary Velger, was a fighter guy. He'd flown F-4s, the F-117, had been a wing commander at the 552nd AWACS wing at Tinker, had a lot of tactical and operational experience. Well, Colonel Swanson told me, you need to get on General Velger's calendar to discuss with him that particular folder for about 15 minutes. Opening the folder up, I looked at the cover sheet and was shocked. I'm like going, are you kidding me, Colonel? Really? AMC's gonna do this? And he goes, yep, AMC's gonna do this. And that's why you need to get on General Gary Velger's calendar. My very first question to Colonel Swanson was, does Air Combat Command know about this? And he looks at me and he says, we have been in discussions. That is not the answer I wanted to hear. But Colonel Swanson told me this is your number one priority while you're up here. And this is also one of General Velger's priorities on his list of things he wants to do while he's the AMC DO. I went back to my desk after talking to Colonel Swanson and started going through this 2.5 to 3 inch stack of paper in this manila folder, looking at emails, discussions that had been had, and of course, General Velger's priorities. And this was like in one of the top 5. Now, having come from Kadena with an AWACS squadron, 3 F-15 squadrons, a helicopter squadron, the tanker squadron, a C-12 squadron, as this great big huge combined 18th wing in Okinawa, I knew some of these folks who had experienced what was in this stack of paper. I think it was about a week and a half later, I got into General Velger's office and sat down with him, and I had that big stack of paper on my lap, and I said, sir, give me the background for this. And he said, Sluggo, it's time for this. Never has there been a better time to do this than now. And I said, sir, does ACC know about this? Air Combat Command, do they know about this? And he goes, yes. Their DO and myself have been talking about it. And I said, sir, how have those discussions been going? And he kind of chuckled and said, sometimes they're good, sometimes not so good. But Mark, this is one of my top priorities. You're the new Chief of Tanker Tactics for Air Mobility Command, and I want this to be your top priority too. And oh, by the way, you're in a flying position, so go figure out what squadron at whatever base you want to go to and get requalled and start flying again. Woohoo! Leaving General Velger's office, I was a little discouraged and wondered, how in the world are we going to do this? There were plenty of pilots and aircrew members at Kadena that had been through this experience, and a matter of fact, one particular gentleman had been an instructor at this school. The school that I'm talking about is the United States Air Force Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. It is the Air Force version of Top Gun. The difference is Top Gun is 9 to 10 weeks long. The weapons school is 19 weeks long. Almost a half a year spent going through this extremely intense school, and knowing these F-15 guys and these AWACS guys and helicopter guys who I'd worked with a lot at Kadena, I could only imagine what they would be thinking when they found out we're going to build a tanker weapons school. I was not at a total loss though. There were 2 gentlemen from the C-130 community that were also on the AMC tactics staff that had created the C-130 school during the short time period that the C-130s were owned by Air Combat Command. General Mike Lowe, the 4-star commanding Air Combat Command, had said to the C-130 community, if you're going to be in this command, you're going to have a weapons school. And both Donnie and Rotten had been on the initial cadre to build that school. At least I had 2 people I could go to ask, how do you even start this process? Well, come to find out, they knew what my priority was. And both of them told me, you are about to go through probably the hardest thing you'll do during your career, building a weapons school. Nobody's going to want you. You're going to get about 4 hours of sleep a night for the next 2 years, maybe 3 years. If you become a member of the initial cadre, you're going to be fighting tooth and nail against another command and their 4-star and all their 3 stars and 2 stars and 1 stars to become part of the United States Air Force Weapons School. And I was thinking to myself, oh, great. I'll be hated by 2 major commands. I just remember coming home and saying to my wife, Valerie, what have I got myself into? Because both Donnie and Rotten sat down with me and said, here's what you got to do. And here's how you got to do it. And you've got to figure out a syllabus. You got to figure out where you're going to bed the school down, how many flying hours you're going to need, how many hours are going to be in the syllabus. You got to go out and find those that are going to help support your syllabus. And I didn't even have a syllabus. We were literally starting from a white sheet of paper to build this school. So with a lot of coaching from both Donnie and Rotten, I started digging into this. General Velger told me if I needed help to come see him, if I needed top cover, which was great and reassuring, but I knew that a lot of this was going to happen in the trenches. And I just remember telling Valerie, oh my gosh, honey, this is going to be, if we pull this off, this is going to be incredible, but I'm going to have a lot of scars on my back because nobody wants this school. And that was confirmed when I started going around to the different tanker wings, talking to the wing commanders and the squadron commanders about creating this air refueling center of excellence, as we called it. The United States Air Force Weapons School KC-135 Division. Of course, when you're going to go out and do something like this, you have to build a roadshow brief that went through Donnie and Rotten to make sure I was going the right direction, Colonel Swanson, and then, of course, General Velger. And he got up in front of everybody and said, all of my air refueling leadership is going to go through this school. No pressure. Well, visiting all the wing commanders, there was one wing commander at Grand Forks who said, we've got to do this and get this done, Mark. And if you need any help from me or any of my guys, I'm more than happy to help you. Why don't you put it here? No, we're not putting it at Grand Forks. We're in this wintertime, it's like minus 37 degrees. So after going to all these different bases, talking to the wing commanders and the squadron commanders, I pretty much knew what the climate of the air refueling community was when it came to supporting this school. I'll give you an example. Talking to one squadron commander in a hallway at one particular base, this squadron commander told me, this is the stupidest thing AMC has ever come up with. This is a waste of resources. This is a waste of time. I can't believe they're doing this. And 2 other squadron commanders kind of told me the same thing. Matter of fact, one of them came to the Tanker Airlift Control Center on a new assignment. And as I approached this individual telling them the same thing, this is what we want to do, I got the same exact answer. Why in the world are we doing this? We're going to be fighter wannabes now. We have to have the weapons school patch. There was several weeks where I went home pretty discouraged. Here I am being told by a general, this is one of my top 5 priorities, and only one person in an entire community that thinks it's the right idea. Fortunately, the AMC vice commander at the time was Lieutenant General John B. Sams, and he saw the vision of this because he understood the planning trouble that we had during Operation Desert Storm. We had tanker folks that were doing planning and execution at the Black Hole that had no idea how to read an air tasking order, which is kind of like our sheet music for air campaign planning. We were all in Strategic Air Command. Strategic Air Command laid everything out for you in this big red binder, all the timing, all the offloads, route of flight, all those kinds of things. And during Desert Storm, we found out that the tanker community was not educated to do a conventional war. There was all kinds of things after Desert Storm, lessons learned about we need to have some tanker center of excellence. We need to teach planning and execution, all those kinds of things. Now, an Air Combat Command General on an exchange tour at AMC said, now's the time to do it. I had two general officers that really did have a vision for what this school was supposed to do. And it was my job to put flesh on the bones to see what it looked like. After briefing all of the commanders, my next task was to find a place to put it. Where are we going to bed this thing down? And so working with Donnie and Rotten, I came up with a whole list of criteria for basing this future tanker weapons school. And here's what that list included. It had to be one of the bigger tanker bases, such as McConnell in Kansas, Wichita, Kansas. Grand Forks, North Dakota was not going to put it there no matter what because it's so dang cold during the wintertime, or Fairchild Air Force Base. Now, MacDill, of course, was a player. Robbins was, of course, a player at that time period. But I needed a place that had a lot of tankers on the ramp. And Wichita, Grand Forks, and Spokane had at least 40 or more tankers on the ramp in 3 squadrons. The bed down location had to have military operating areas close to it where we could go and do air work, formation work, rejoins, all those different kinds of things. The next thing, obviously, it had to have was receivers. Different types of receivers, both Navy and Marine Corps probe and drogue receivers, bomber receivers, fighter receivers. And the other thing I said it had to be close to Nellis, and it also had to be close to other units that would have a lot of the weapons school graduates, or as we call them, the patch wearers that were within an hour to an hour and a half flying distance from that base. Grand Forks did not fit the bill for the bed down location because it did not meet the standard criteria, and it's just too dang cold. McConnell was a good location. They had a previous SAC base up to the north, lots of military operating areas, but it was still a pretty long drive to fighter, bomber, AWACS, and other patch-wearing units. So Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington, up in Airway Heights, west of the city, was my last base that I looked at. Fairchild was an old strategic Air Command bomber base, still had its alert facility there and its big Christmas tree. They actually had an empty squadron to put the school in, 1 runway, 48 tankers. To the north of the base was the Okanagan MOA that was used specifically by the Navy EA-6B community. Out to the west near Seattle, off the coast, there were numerous military operating areas that F-15s that had been based at McChord would practice in. And of course, there was also an F-15 unit at Portland, the Portland Air National Guard. McChord Air Force Base was just transitioning from C-141s to C-17s. So now I had airlift receivers also. But the other thing about McChord Air Force Base is that is where the Western Air Defense Sector was located, called WADS, or their call sign was Bigfoot. To the east, I had Ellsworth, South Dakota, Ellsworth Air Force Base, that had B-1 bombers. And all of these places were with about an hour to an hour and a half flying time. A lot of these units, except for the C-17s, had either Top Gun graduates or weapons school graduates located in those units. To me, Fairchild was the obvious choice for bedding down this KC-135 weapons school. I went in, showed Colonel Swanson that Fairchild met all the criteria. He had a few more questions for me, which I was able to answer. officer, and he said, okay, get on General Velger's calendar, go in and tell him, because he has to make the announcement that this is where the school is going to be. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, he made the announcement that our KC-135 Center of Excellence was going to be located at Fairchild Air Force Base in an empty squadron area that was on West Arnold Street near the alert facility of Fairchild Air Force Base. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the United States Air Force Weapons School 509th Weapons Squadron, KC-135 Division of the Weapons School, is located to this day. There were some folks that were upset that they didn't get the nod for this, because obviously there's going to be a lot of money coming into the base to build something like this. You have to build the classrooms, the infrastructure, all kinds of money was going to come in when that base got the nod for where the school is going to be. As a matter of fact, I think Lieutenant General Sams, the AMC Vice, wrote, I think it was a $936,000 check out of the Air Mobility Command checkbook to start the KC-135 Weapons School. Now we've got a base, now we've got the money, but I can't do this alone. And we have to choose an initial cadre. Now, what kind of criteria do you have to have for an initial cadre? Well, again, Donnie and Rotten said they have to be instructors in the airframe. They have to have a good amount of instructor time in the airframe. I needed to have instructor pilots, instructor navigators, and instructor boom operators on the initial cadre to help build this school. Going around to all the bases once again, I made a call for resumes to be on the initial cadre. And of course, some of these squadron commanders were saying, I'm not giving up any of my people for this. It's a dead end, which of course was discouraging. Okay. Because I thought, why wouldn't you want to be part of something that's truly going to be remarkable and make such a huge impact on the way the KC-135, KC-10, and the air refueling community in the Air Force does its business? Like I said, I had some squadron commanders that said, no, absolutely not. Do I have anybody that's going to put in a package to be part of this initial cadre? We got, I think it was the first round, about 14 packages. And out of those 14 packages, if I remember right, we picked 6 people. As we got together as a cadre, we realized that we needed at least 1, maybe 2 more people. We had another call for packages, resumes to be on the initial cadre, and we picked 1 more person. So now there's 7 of us initial cadre members that are going to be the ones that are going to put this school together. We also chose 3 intel folks. We also had to pick some admin folks to help the squadron run. We also had to find a chief boom operator, a senior NCO to help us run all of this. Fortunately, that was an easy choice because it was Chief Master Sergeant Dan Rep, who I had known ever since I was a brand new co-pilot. That was easy, and his package was really good. In November of 1998, Chief Master Sergeant Dan Rep and I show up within just a couple days of each other. Dan gets there first. I get there just a couple days later. And we have this massive squadron area. We have 2 folding chairs, and our phone is sitting on a cardboard box. Welcome to the KC-135 Center of Excellence. Our chain of command fell under the Air Mobility Command Mobility School at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Our immediate supervision was from the Combat Air Delivery School, which the C-130 Weapons School fell under at Little Rock Air Force Base in Little Rock, Arkansas. So the initial cadre got together and began putting together our syllabus in Little Rock, Arkansas. We were starting with a blank sheet of paper. We really didn't know what to do as far as creating this syllabus. We went through curriculum development school, which just teaches you how to create the classes. But it was really up to us to figure out, what does this school need? The first place you start when you're building a school like this is, what is the behavior that we're trying to change, or the skill set that we're trying to provide to the air refueling community? And we went back and looked at all these historical things from Desert Storm, Vietnam, even a little bit from the Korean War, mostly from Vietnam and Desert Storm. Fortunately for us, after Desert Storm, the Gulf War Air Power Survey became kind of our Bible for things that we needed to have in the tanker weapons school. The 7 of us, we're all piled in a room and we're going through all of these lessons learned and all of these different things, trying to figure out what do we need to have in this school. It was hard doing this because we had to make some tough decisions on where our community was, both tactically and operationally. As we dug deeper into our planning and execution and our combat tactics, we found out we were tactical misfits. We were not allowed to do our combat maneuvers in training. We were not allowed to do retrogrades in the airplane. We could do them in the simulator, and I had actually created a syllabus for doing some of our tactical arrivals into bases, tactical departures, and even retrogrades in the simulator while I was at Kadena, but we weren't allowed to do them in the airplane. We were tactically unsound. Nobody had ever tested any of these tactics to see if they worked, nor had anybody figured out how do you do it as a 3-ship of tankers? How do you do it as a 5-ship of tankers? During Desert Storm, we were flying 5-ship formations of tankers to refuel some of these huge strike packages that had as many as 40 receivers in them. If we got tapped by an Iraqi fighter, how are we going to retrograde back into Saudi Arabia and do it without killing ourselves on a moonless night over the middle of the desert where you couldn't see the ground? None of this had been tested. None of this could be done in the airplane. And as a matter of fact, we had a caution that says none of these tactics will be done in the airplane. And if they're going to be done, we had to have the AMC DO's approval to do them, which means we had to go to General Velger and get a signed letter saying these are the kinds of things that we're going to do in this school. And I remember having a conversation with the tanker safety guy at AMC, and he straight up told me, "You're going to kill people, Mark." And I just couldn't understand why somebody would say that. We've got to figure out how to do this in case we actually have to do retrogrades, and we're going to put it in the syllabus. But the chief of AMC safety for tankers told me, "You are going to kill people doing this." More discouragement, more disappointment. But we kept moving forward because we had to take our tactics and our planning and our execution from this immature stage to a much more mature, a much more knowledgeable cadre of people that could go out and plan nuclear, conventional, and even emergency air refueling operations during some crisis. So our next point on the map that we looked at was, well, let's go see what our doctrinal air refueling missions are and start with those. Cracking open Air Force Doctrine Document 3-17, Air Mobility Operations, we went straight to Chapter 4 on air refueling. And this is where our light really came on. Our first doctrinal mission is nuclear operations support. This is part of the nuclear triad, refueling the B-2s, the B-52s that are going to strike China, Russia, or any adversary with nuclear weapons. That was our first and primary mission. Our second mission was global strike support. This is where B-52s, B-1s, or B-2 bombers were going to strike someplace with conventional weapons. A good example of this is the B-2 missions to Sirte, Libya, to bomb the 2 ISIS training camps were there. That's a global strike operation. Third doctrinal mission, air bridging. Now, air bridging is where tankers are set up along certain locations to refuel fighters or airlifters that are deploying to a theater during some crisis. A great example of that is the Afghanistan war, the beginning of Operation Enduring Freedom, where you had not only global strike support with bombers coming from the States, but also from Fairford in England and Diego Garcia. I think some coming as far as way from Guam, but you also had airlifters that were bringing paratroops into Afghanistan. That is the air bridge, where you have a series of tankers that meet these airplanes along their route of flight, give them the gas gas that they need to continue going into some particular area of responsibility. The next one is aircraft deployment support. And the difference between this and air bridging is deployment support is like for exercises. If we were going to send a bunch of Marine F-18s, Air Force F-15s down to Australia for the big pitch black exercise, that is considered aircraft deployment support, where those fighters are following the tankers along their route of flight into Darwin, Australia, where they have that particular exercise at pitch black. Theater support is when you have a massive air campaign like Operation Enduring Freedom or the Shock and Awe campaign. You already have all the assets over there. You have the Strike Eagles, you have the carrier airplanes, you have the bombers, all these different airplanes, including the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance airplanes. They are going to get theater support. They are there to help run an air campaign. The last one is special operations support. And this is for the MC-130s, the AC-130s that are carrying special operations troops around the world, or the AC-130 that is providing close air support for troops on the ground, troops in contact, those kinds of things. So those are the 6 missions that we started with: nuclear operations, global strike support, air bridging, aircraft deployment, theater support like a big air campaign, and special operations support. From looking at these 6 doctrinal missions, now we knew which direction we had to go. We knew that we had to have nuclear operations support in our syllabus. How do you do the planning for it? How do you do the execution for it? How do you do minimum interval takeoffs? All of these different things that were part of the single integrated operation plan, the nuclear deterrence for the United States. Global strike support, bombers going off to drop conventional weapons. Air bridging, AMC, we're going to go see Air Mobility Command about how they do that. Aircraft deployment, theater support was really our bread and butter area, because when it comes time for these big air campaigns to happen, they require a lot of gas and a lot of tankers. To give you an idea, Shock and Awe campaign, we were averaging about 12 million pounds transferred a day from 265 tanker sorties. That includes KC-10s, KC-135s, and other tankers such as the British tankers, the S-3 Vikings coming off the carrier deck, and of course special operations support, because they do it down low. We had a specific mission and a specific squadron that did 3,000 foot on NVGs, night vision goggles, rendezvous with the MC-130s, the AC-130s, and we had to teach all of that. So we had a pretty good roadmap now for what we were going to include in the syllabus. I was a major as far as ranks concerned at this time period, but I had all the corporate knowledge on how we were going to put this together. Of course, I had a lot of great people that were on the initial cadre. Gramps, Mojo, Pete, all these people that we had on the initial cadre that were going to divvy up all of these different areas of the syllabus. And each one of us took a part of the syllabus and we ran with it. And we came up with some extremely original and really, really good training events. I was the only one on the initial cadre that had been on an aircraft carrier. A quarter to a third of our receivers in any given war are Navy and Marine Corps fighters or supporting the carrier battle groups. So I took that portion of the syllabus as my own. And I will tell you, the KC-135 community, we were morons when it came to how the Navy and the Marine Corps did their business. I had no idea what MAGTAF was. I had no idea about how the Navy did their planning cycles, how the carrier decks operated, all of those different kinds of things. I had seen it numerous times and knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know where to go to find this information. But I did figure it out, and that was the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center that had moved with Top Gun from Miramar in Southern California to Naval Air Station Fallon, Nevada. Fallon owns all the airspace to the north of the Nellis Range. That's where Top Gun is. That's where all the carrier battle groups go during their workups. So I knew that if I was going to learn how a KC-135, KC-10 Air Force Force tanker community was going to integrate with the Navy, that was the place to go. I called one of my Top Gun buddies and said, hey, this is what I'm a part of. This is the information I need. Who do I even contact up there? He goes, oh, you need to go to this location and these people. And I said, okay. Good. Do you have a phone number? Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. Here it is. And I made a phone call and I said, look, I know you have no idea who I am. And you guys are really busy up there doing your own syllabi for Top Gun, this what's called SLATs, Strike Leader Attack Training School, all these different things. But I'm a KC-135 guy. We're building a KC-135 weapons school. And he goes, what? A KC-135 weapons school? Really? And I could hear it in his voice. Like, what are you guys going to put in this? But I kept talking. I says, look, I would really like to come up and see you and spend some time with you because we have got to learn as a community how to integrate better with the Navy carrier strike groups, with the Marine Air Ground task forces. And I know that you guys have the answer I'm looking for, and it's up there somewhere. And he says, yeah, sure, come on up. So the next week, hopped on an airplane from Spokane, flew down to Reno, got in a car, and drove out into the middle of the Nevada desert to Fallon Naval Air Station and met with this particular gentleman who was a Top Gun graduate, F-14 guy, and his call sign was Toast. And Toast sat down with me and he goes, so what are you looking for? And I says, Toast, I need to find some kind of document that teaches the Air Force tanker community how you guys do your business. What is that? And he goes, oh, you want our TAC memo, which will soon be our Naval Strike and Air Warfare Manual. And I go, okay, do you have a copy of it somewhere? And he goes, yeah, we can get it off of our SIPRNet here at Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center. They call it NSOC. And he brought out this TAC memo and laid it on the desk in front of me. And I thought, okay, well, what's this going to do? Is this even going to help? As I looked at the table of content, Toast Bernie had laid the Golden Bible in front of me. He says, now, Sluggo, we're about to publish this as our Naval Strike and Air Warfare Manual. We're in the process of doing that publishing right now. So this TAC memo is going to become this publication, but virtually they're the same. And you can use this to build your syllabi. And I said, Toast, if I build this portion of our syllabus, I want you guys to be the validator of it, okay? I'm not a Navy guy, but I know if I come here with our courseware, you guys will be able to tell me yay, yay, or nay, nay on whatever I put in it. Would you mind doing that? Oh, no, not at all. Happy to do it for you guys because we need smart tanker guys. And I said, that's exactly what we're trying to do. So looking down the table of content, everything I needed was in there. How they do carrier battle group defense, how they do their long range strikes, how they do short range strikes, how they do surface warfare. All of these different missions that the Navy does were all inside that Naval Strike and Air Warfare Manual. It was a gold mine for everything that I needed. And once I got back to Spokane, went to the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center SIPRNet site, their secret internet site, downloaded a copy of this, showed it to all my buddies, and they're like going, holy smokes, where has this been all our lives? And I said, this is where our courseware for how to refuel the Navy and how to integrate with the Navy is going to come from. And everything was in that manual. Everything, even a lexicon of words that they use, their language that they would use back and forth, how they would do carrier battle group defense, how they do surface warfare, everything was there. How they do the long range strikes, and during their workups, they would actually fly and simulate these long range strikes going from Southern California. They would go feet dry just south of San Francisco, fly all the way to Nevada, drop their bombs on simulated targets near Fallon on the Fallon Range, and then reverse route back to the aircraft carrier. It's like a 3-hour flight for these fighters, which is a long time. With the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Manual, I was able to build 6 hours of courseware, and it went through everything. Here's how the battle group does defense. Here's how the Aegis cruiser does defense. Here's how the Aegis cruiser is going to defend us. Here's how the carrier is going to defend us. Here's how the Marine Air Ground Task Force wants to integrate KC-135s and KC-10s into the MAGTAF. Here's how they're going to do surface warfare. Here's their command and control structure. Here's who's going to control us off the cruiser. Here's who's going to control us off the carrier. It was all in this manual. So 6 hours of courseware I built out of of that manual. Now, the next thing I wanted to do is I wanted all of our students to have the same experience I did. And that was going on an aircraft carrier for a night and seeing day operations and night operations, and possibly getting a catapult takeoff and an arrested landing for the folks that were going through the school. Well, the place to do that obviously was in San Diego. And I found who I needed to talk to, Carrier Air Group down there, to schedule us to go out on the aircraft carrier. But what I did was we spent the morning on an Aegis cruiser or destroyer learning how they did air defense and how they expected us to operate inside the carrier battle group. And then in the afternoon, the USS Coronado, which was the Air Operations Center afloat ship for the Pacific. That night, we would put our bags on an aircraft carrier and the next morning go out to sea while the carriers were off Southern California doing what they call CQ, carrier qualifications. And that's a whole nother process in of itself. You have to have 5 day carrier landings before you can have your 5 night carrier landings in order to be qualified. We went from each of the departments inside the carrier. We talked to all the ready rooms. Our students were given a PowerPoint slide deck, and they were told to go into the ready rooms and teach all of those in the ready rooms, hey, here's how the KC-135, KC-10 operate. Here's what we expect from you guys. And also how we would integrate the S3, which was the organic tanker for the air wings, into the air refueling plant. So we ended up having 1 day of academics, leaving about 4 o'clock in the afternoon to go to San Diego, getting there that night, checking into a hotel. The next morning, about 9 o'clock, we'd be in an Aegis cruiser or the USS Coronado. And then that night, put our bags on an aircraft carrier and go out to sea for 2 days. We did that for 4 classes because I left after our 3rd class. And of course, the syllabus went through some more changes. And now they do all of the Navy stuff at Pearl Harbor. They hop in the tanker and go to Honolulu. Why didn't I think of that? 2 of our cadre members got a hold of the F-15 unit at Portland. And the Western Air Defense Sector patch wearer or weapons school graduate at WADS at McCord. His call sign was Soup Campbell. And Soup had been a controller at Kadena when I was there. So I knew Soup very well. And they put together an incredible retrograde syllabus where we had the Navy as the bad guys and the F-15s from Portland as the good guys defending the tankers, telling us when to retrograde, as well as the ground controllers telling us when to retrograde and actually doing the maneuvers. Now, we had to go get this waiver in order to do it from the AMCDO, General Velger, and subsequently General Hopper, but we could do it, and we could do it in the airplane. And guess what? We didn't kill anybody because we had a graduated approach to doing this where we did a lot of air work prior to doing the actual retrogrades. And these retrogrades, they were pretty incredible when you did them. We would go with the nose steep down and the gear and the speed brakes out, and we were dropping like a rock in a big airplane. But there was a lot of reasons for that, and it worked out very well. And then the Portland F-15 guys would land at Fairchild and debrief with us how we did based on what they saw from their airplanes against the Hornets and Tomcats that were coming from Top Gun. Really, really cool portion of the syllabus. Well, the best way to learn about nuclear operations and Global Strike is just to go to Omaha, Nebraska, where Global Strike Command was, and we would sit down with them and get briefings on how they expected the tankers to operate. And that was a really good visit. We did the same with our special operations folks down in Tampa. And of course, we spent a lot of time at Air Mobility Command in the TACC and the different organizations that have command and control, planning and execution functions over the tankers. Well, right in the middle of all of this, getting ready for our first class, General Hopper, John Hopper, who is now the AMCDO, General Velger has left, sends a message to our Combat Air Delivery School commandant saying, Ed, I need your help. The air refueling plan for Kosovo needs a lot of work, and I need to take 4 of your noble and great ones and deploy them to the KAOK at Vicenza, and I need them there now. the gas bill for Allied force was going through the roof. And there was only one guy that was kind of running all of the planning and execution, somebody who I knew very well, and he just needed help. So now we had the opportunity for four of us to go to the Combined Air and Space Operations Center during a massive United Nations air campaign and really see if the stuff that we were teaching worked. We did not realize that we would be there for over 4 months doing it in Italy. I mean, it's not bad duty, but we already knew that the tankers made their money at the operational level. In other words, at the Vicenza Combined Air and Space Operations Center. That's where the most focus needed to be on the planning and execution. At the tactical level, if the plans that we built at the KAOC were sound, then at the unit level, as the KC-135s fanned out and did their business, if we did it properly at the KAOC, there were very few headaches at the unit level. And sure enough, Allied force showed us that in spades. Here was one of the things that was happening. We were wasting a lot of gas. I'm talking almost 1 million pounds a day. Any of you that have been to Europe during the winter time, and remember the air campaign started in March, knows that the weather stinks during the late winter, early spring months in Italy, Kosovo, and throughout that whole region. And what was happening was the tankers were taking off from bases in Morón, Spain, requiring a 3-hour transit time to get to the Adriatic Sea where they were set up to refuel. Well, during that time period while they were flying, their receivers were being canceled. And so in order to land, the tankers were having to dump gas to get to their landing weight. And one night they dumped 903,000 pounds of gas. Now, the other three gentlemen had gone to the units, one at Monte Mersan, one at Morón, and I can't remember where the third Initial Cadre member went. I was at Vicenza. And this brigadier general came up to me and says, Sluggo, we're so ineffective and inefficient here. We're dumping, thousands and hundreds of thousands of pounds of gas. What's going on here? And I said, sir, I know right away what's happening. You're thinking like a fighter guy. You're not thinking like a tanker guy. Sir, these packages that are launching from all of these bases in and around Kosovo and Montenegro, they're waiting for tankers that are coming 2 and 3 hours away. You have to make a decision on the weather when the tankers take off, not when the fighters take off. That's the problem. You need to be clairvoyant enough to say, we can launch tankers from Morón, Spain, 3 hours away, and they will have receivers. Because what you've been doing, sir, is waiting for the weather here in the area and figuring out, okay, can we launch the fighters? When in fact, all of your packages had started 2 and 3 hours before. And he looked at me and he went, oh, you're right. And so the other folks that were running the air campaign, when we explained that to them, it all made sense to them. I remember turning around in my chair, looking at the 2-star general and said, sir, RGB package Delta is about to launch. And he looked at me and goes, no, Sluggo, they don't take off for 2 hours. I said, sir, your tankers are taking off in 10 minutes. You need to make a decision on that package now. And he go, oh, yeah, okay, got it. All right. And they did a whole weather scrub. And he turned to me and said, Sluggo, looks like the weather's going to be good. Marginal in some areas, but good. Go ahead and launch the tankers. Well, guess what? Once we started doing that, the whole fuel dumping into the tens and hundreds of thousands of pounds went to a trickle. The other problem that we had was we were trying to pack too many airplanes into one location with a tanker fleet that was going through a avionics modification called Pacer Crag that had the terminal control and avoidance system in it, but the others did not. And we were having near misses, sometimes numerous near misses, almost every night because we were trying to pack too many airplanes into the area. part of our syllabus was how to build air refueling airspace when you have a big area and a small compact area. How you do retrogrades from them, how you call those retrogrades, and how you do the command and control. And so we did a complete revamp of all the air refueling areas up and down the Adriatic Sea and around Yugoslavia, Montenegro, Kosovo, based on our syllabus and the planning factors and planning classes that we had. And again, the near misses dropped quite significantly. Now, we still had a few near misses, to include one that scared the pants off of all of us, because we just weren't watching what we were doing. And what happened was we had a low altitude air refueling area that the KC-135s would go into that the AC-130s used. What we weren't told was there was an area above us that the AC-130s would go to range in and tune in their guns. And one night, a tanker had made like a south to southeast turn when all of a sudden all kinds of rounds started going by it in the middle of the night. And they're like, we're getting shot at from above. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, what? From above? If anywhere, it's coming from below. And the tanker saying, no, it's coming from above. And quickly going to the special ops guys, finding out that they tuned in and ranged in their guns in this particular area, we immediately moved that low altitude tanker track to the south out from underneath this area where the AC-130 gunships. Oh, and the other thing it was used for, if fighters had hung bombs, they would go to this area and try to shake the bombs loose. And that happened on numerous occasions too. So we had a lot of changes that we had to make, but everything that we were teaching in our syllabus prepared us to do those changes and to do them confidently. So when we got back to Fairchild Air Force Base, the four of us, we wrote up this great big huge lessons learned. And a matter of fact, General John Jumper, the United States Air Force Europe commander, had a lessons learned conference that they invited us to. And we helped write that chapter on tanker operations so that we would capture all of those lessons learned. And in fact, General Begert, who was also one of the commanders over there, said, we have to have a cadre of experienced planning and execution tanker folks at the KAOC to help run the war. He had been there. He had seen us operating there. The three that were at the units were brought to the KAOC. I moved from the KAOC to Aviano, where they had another operational planning cell, and we had a lot of lessons learned. But the biggest lesson learned was we only had to tune our syllabus a little bit to make it functional, to make it what we needed, or so we thought. I believe it was the great Prussian general Helmuth von Moltke who said, no plan survives its first contact in combat. Well, there's a corollary to that. No syllabus survives its first contact with students. And during our first class with 4 students, we realized that we had portions of the syllabus backwards. If we were trying to do a building block approach, the Jenga pile was going to come down. And so we executed the approved syllabus, but while we were executing that very first syllabus with our very first class, we realized that we had to do a major shakeup on the syllabus. But here was the problem. That very first syllabus that we were executing had gone through the entire approval process, and now we all looked at each other and went, this ain't right. And so our syllabus manager said, we've got to sit down and completely look at where everything goes. And what happened was we put a syllabus on a single sheet of paper, and we called it the secret syllabus. When our second class showed up, we didn't teach the approved syllabus. We taught the secret syllabus. We knew it was better. We knew it flowed better. We knew it had a much better building block approach to the knowledge and information and the exercises that the students were going through. But again, the approved syllabus was the one we were supposed to be teaching. So we didn't tell our leadership what we were doing. All of us kind of swore an oath that we would fall on our swords and say, this is the better way to do it if we got caught doing the secret syllabus. Well, second class came through the secret syllabus, minor adjustments, but it flowed really, really well. And if I remember right, our syllabus had 482 academic hours, 18 5-hour flights, 1 3-hour simulator ride, and a graduate level paper that you had to accomplish in 19 weeks, just shy of 6 months. That's like getting a doctorate degree in a matter of months. And it's brutal on the students. As a matter of fact, in our second class, we had 2 students that said, I did not sign up for this. And when we told them, this is a formal education program, if you self-eliminate, you will go to a flight evaluation board where they could possibly take your wings. You can imagine what that did to their demeanor. They both were pretty upset. But both of them said, okay, we're going to push through it. We're going to keep going. Air Combat Command had a change of the commandant of the Air Force Weapons School just prior to this class. The first one that we dealt with said, absolutely no, will you be part of this? The second commandant that we dealt with said, well, maybe it's not so bad having smart tanker guys, but that's above my pay grade, putting you guys as part of this school. So we asked him, can we come and do the core classes? The core classes were on all of the threats, the capabilities of our bombs and missiles and airplanes, radars, all those kinds of things. And can we run all the execution and planning for the big stage of the weapons school, which at that time was called mission employment and is now called advanced integration. And that commandant said, you know what? I think we can do that. And he was able to make that decision, and we got our foot in the door. Our students would come down and get these incredible classes on our adversary threats, missiles, airplanes, everything, and our U.S. Air Force capabilities, LIMFACs of our airplanes, missiles, bombs. And we were now part of the big exercise, which we were already. And our students would do all the planning and execution for the 4 or 5 tankers that would come to support mission employment, now called advanced integration. Well, one of those students that wanted to quit the class, what we call SIE, self-initiated elimination, saw me in the parking lot one day at the billeting office. And he said, hey, Sluggo, can I talk to you just for a few moments? And I said, sure, Bucks, what's up? He said, I got to tell you something. And I'm like, ugh, please. Do not SIE this late in the program. And he said to me, I wanted to tell you, you guys have done your job well. And I says, why is that, Bucks? He said, Sluggo, I just sat through one of the weapons school's mass briefs for the mission tomorrow, and I understood everything that they were doing. I understood all of the language that they were speaking. But more importantly, Sluggo, I knew why they were doing it. And I think my comeback was really stupid. I think I said something to him like, well done, Grasshopper. It's great that you stayed through this and now you understand this. Well, guess what? At the end of that class, we had some of our Initial Cadre members who were up for reassignment. Guess who came back as a cadre member? Bucks. The guy that wanted to leave the course came back after he graduated as one of our instructors. I have one other anecdotal story, and it happened during the Navy portion that I was teaching. There was no West Coast aircraft carrier available for us to go and visit. There was an East Coast carrier that was going to be off of the Virginia Capes getting ready to do its 6-month deployment to the Middle East. I called back to that ComNav AirPac group saying, hey, this is who we are. This is what we want to do. And they said, hey, love to have you. Come on back. Bring your wet weather gear. Sucks right now. And I go, why's that? He goes, well, looks like we might have a tropical depression going through while you guys are here. And I thought, oh, great. But he said, we would love to have you guys. So we got there, did the same thing, went out on a cruiser, went to AOC, a float ship that evening, went and put all of our stuff on the USS Enterprise in preparation for the next morning pushing off. That night, I had asked all of the folks on the carrier, hey, we're going to be ashore. Is there a good place we can go eat? And they said, oh, yeah, at the end of this street, there's a great seafood place. The whole cadre went and gorged themselves, except me. I don't do seafood, on wonderful lobster and everything, crab and so forth at this great, great seafood restaurant near the base. The next morning, we get up because we'd stayed on the ship, and man, it was crazy. That tropical depression was coming through the area. But the Enterprise is going out on its 6-month deployment, and it's going out. And so that morning, it was a driving rainstorm, and the carrier was rocking and got situated outside where they go over the top of this tunnel and began going to all the different departments to see how they do carrier operations. Well, we happened to be up in Pry-Fly, the tower for aircraft operations on the carrier deck, when airplanes started arriving. And I'm telling you, that was really scary. Some of these pilots were coming in and they had maybe a 2 to 3 second look at the landing area before they had to go around. Several of the planes coming aboard, F-18s, F-14s, ended up boltering, in other words, not catching a wire and having to go around in this really soupy weather. Well, the next day we were still on board, and again, we're going down the hallways, and the tropical depression is still affecting the ocean, and that big, huge carrier is rocking back and forth like crazy. And a couple of our students weren't feeling really well. We had a few more places we had to go in the morning. We actually got a COD and a cat shot on the C-2 Greyhound carrier onboard delivery airplane that afternoon, with the boat rocking pretty good. Once we got feet on the ground back at Oceana, it was still pretty windy, wasn't raining, but that was a really, really memorable trip to the aircraft carrier. Now, fast forward, this is in March 2001, April 2001, if I remember right. I leave the cadre, go to the wing because I got fired. My commandant lost confidence in my leadership, and he says, you can't stay here. And so I left and went to the wing. I didn't want to leave the area, and I just wanted to stay there. Very disappointing, very discouraging. Went through a really sad period in my career, which I'll talk about in some other episode, but 9/11 happens. I get called out of bed at 5:50 in the morning to come in and begin preparing air refueling, planning, and execution for the entire West Coast with fighters already airborne. 2 of our students end up going to the Middle East. One of them had been on the Enterprise with that class. I replaced him later on, and I remember him telling me they had this big planning meeting at the Combined Air and Space Operations Center at Prince Sultan. The Air Wing Commander, Yukon Jack Godlewski, came in and he points and he goes, you're an Air Force tanker guy and I know you from somewhere. And he goes, sir, I was a student at the KC-135 Combat Employment School that came to your aircraft carrier back in March, April, when you guys were getting ready to deploy, and we were aboard during that stinking tropical depression. And the Air Wing Commander looked at his planners, Mongo Koss being one of them. He's been on an episode. You can go back and listen to it. And Yukon looks at his guys and goes, gentlemen, we've got a smart tanker guy here that knows how we do our business. I don't think there's a better customer quote than to have an Air Wing commander that's about to go into battle and say to all of his planners and his strike lead, Mongo Koss, gentlemen, we have a smart tanker guy here that knows how we do our business. At the end of the Shock and Awe campaign, Lieutenant General Mike Mosley, the Combined Forces Air Component Commander, said, hey, Sluggo, you got a minute? I want to talk to you. And I said, sure, sir. And I walked into his office. He pulled his desk drawer out and he handed me in a handshake 2 of his coins. And he said, Sluggo, your team has performed magnificently. My greatest commodity was gas. And you guys were able to handle everything that we threw at you. And that was because I had Gramps, an Initial Cadre member, and several of our graduates that were working in the Master Air Attack Plan cell doing all of the tanker planning. Lieutenant General Mosley said to me, is there anything I can do for you? And I said, General, we're not part of the weapons school. And I really wish we were, because that's really where we belong. And he said, can you keep a secret? And I says, well, sure, sir. He says, I know what my next assignment is. I'm going to be the new Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And Sluggo, one of the things that I'm going to do when I get there is make sure that we bring all of the weapons schools together. Because now there was a C-17 weapons school, which of course used most of the syllabus from the C-130 school because the airplanes do common missions. There was also an Air Force Special Operations Command school for the AC and MC-130s. And General Mosley told me, I'm going to make sure that we bring them all together. He says, I don't know if you know this or not, but I was once the commandant of the weapons school as a colonel. I said, sir, I did not know that. And he says, Sluggo, I promise you, that's one of the things that I'm going to work on when I become Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Well, I left the KAOC, went home, packed our house up, moved to Virginia Beach to teach at the Joint Forces Staff College. During one of the Navy's big symposiums on the East Coast, they had a panel discussing all the things that had gone on during the shock and awe Iraqi freedom campaign. And guess who was on the panel? Lieutenant General Mike Mosley. Now, this is a Navy symposium. I'm probably the only blue suit Air Force guy in the entire audience. And General Mosley walks out on stage and he sees me and he points to the edge of the stage. And I come up and I talk to him for a few minutes. I said, how are you? How's your wife? How's your family doing in your new position? He goes, doing great. I wanted to tell you I'm working on it. I'm working on getting all the weapons schools together, all the AMC schools and all of the other schools together in one place. All of them wearing the same patch, all of them doing the same thing. It's silliness not to have you guys with all this knowledge and expertise not be part of the Air Force Weapons School and wearing the patch. I said, thank you, sir. That's all I could ask for. Well, about a year and a half later, he became Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And sure enough, one of the first things General Mosley did was bring all of the weapons schools together, everybody wearing the same patch. And now I think there are 18 separate units in the United States Air Force Weapons School, which is just amazing when you see all of them come together for advanced integration. They do this mini air campaign, and the scenarios have changed a little bit since I was going through. But now the 509th Weapons School has been going for 22 years and has over 210 graduates. They chose the 509th as the new weapons school squadron. The 509th Air Refueling Squadron was the very first air refueling squadron in the Air Force with KB-29 tankers back in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And they have on their patch the red mobile horse. We actually had to go to Mobile and get permission to use their horse on the patch. And they told us, just turn it around so the horse faces a different direction. And that patch is on the coat that hangs on the chair that I am sitting in. Wonderful legacy. What are my lessons learned from building such an intense course like this? My first lesson from this is I was filled with a lot of fear and doubts when I began building this school. Can I do this? Can we pull this off? Fortunately, the leadership that I worked with had incredible vision of what this school was supposed to be like, but more importantly, what the graduate needed to do when they were done at the end of the syllabus. I look back on building that school, just like Donnie and Rotten had said. I was on the road a lot. I had a brand new baby at home. I was spending a lot of time in Little Rock. But my confidence was building as we began building this syllabus, and I began working with these other incredible tanker experts building this school from the ground up. Another lesson learned: go to your customer and find out what they need from you. I spent a lot of time with the Navy folks at Fallon, both Top Gun and the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center folks, saying, what does the tanker community and the Air Force need to do to change how we do business when it comes to dealing with the Navy? I would exhort all of you to go to your customers and have what may be that very hard conversation, because they may be honest and tell you exactly what you're doing wrong. But there's no better tool than that debriefing tool. Being able to sit down with your customer and say, where do we need to change? Where are we doing good? But more importantly, where are we doing bad? I was fortunate enough to be able to work with people like Toast, Size, who later became the Top Gun commander and an Air Wing commander on the East Coast. Saw him numerous times. Sluggo, what are you doing here? And learn from them how better to put a tanker into naval operations. Another big lesson from building this school is with anything that you're going to do, which is truly going to change the way your community does business or makes you extremely successful, you are going to have a lot of detractors. We had to put up with a lot of bovine feces being thrown at us. Why are you doing this? Why do you guys want to be fighter wannabes? Why in the world would we spend this kind of money? The things that you're doing are dangerous, over and over and over again. But I tell you folks, where you're building something that is truly magnificent, but when you get on the other side of creating something that is truly significant in the lives of your employees or the nature and culture of your business, it is absolute bliss. It is the most rewarding feeling, and I'm having a hard time keeping my emotions here, because going back and seeing all of the plaques of all of the students that have gone through that school that we began in 1998 was extremely gratifying. And then hearing what the students and graduates of the school are doing, not only for the United States Air Force, but in places like Israel and Greece and Germany and in the Pacific, it is an emotion that is euphoric. My last exhortation to every one of you: go and learn something new, a new language, a new skill. Spend some time with TED Talks or Tony Robbins, JT Fox, Mel Robbins, all of these people that are in this business of making people better, and make yourself better by learning a new behavior or learning a new skill. It's extremely rewarding that I have been able to teach myself how to do these profile drawings, and I literally started this almost from scratch. Fortunately, Jack spent hours with me on the phone, as did Scott, teaching me better ways to do these drawings. And it's a skill that I really enjoy now. So please, folks, go out and learn something new. Just pick something, some skill that you've always wanted, and set yourself up for success. People are going to doubt you. People are going to badmouth you. Why are you doing this? Don't spend your money or time on this. But the rewards on the back end of it are blissful, folks, are incredible. I want to thank all of you for downloading and listening to this episode, the 55th episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. We're well on our way to 100 episodes. Hopefully, we're well on our way to 10,000 subscribers. So please, folks, go to my website and subscribe to the Lessons from the Cockpit show. And also go and listen to some of the other previous episodes, like Mongo Koss, who was the planner for the opening of not only Enduring Freedom in October, but Operation Iraqi Freedom in March of the following year. This episode is brought to you by the book Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit, available in all 4 formats at Amazon: hardback, softback, Kindle, and Audible. Now, I will tell you, the softback version, all the pictures that I put in there are in color. Yes, I am the author of the book, but if you download the Audible or the Kindle version, there is a separate file that comes with your purchase of that format that has those pictures in it. Tanker Pilot helps finance the podcast, so please, folks, go to Amazon.com and buy a copy of Tanker Pilot Lessons from the Cockpit. That's where I got the name for this podcast. This and previous episodes of the Lessons from the Cockpit podcast are found on my website, marcusera.com, under the podcast pull-down box. You can also get the book there and the profiles that I talked about. Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar are all found in one place at marcusera.com. Thanks, folks, for tuning in today and listening to how we built the KC-135 Weapons School and me being on the Initial Cadre. Some other time, I will tell you about getting fired as the second in command of that school because of loss of confidence in my leadership abilities and what happened after that. It was truly a very dark time in my career. I knew I wasn't going to be a squadron commander, but 9/11 changed everything as I deployed 8 days later to the Middle East using all of the information, knowledge, and expertise I had gained from creating this school. Thanks, folks. Look forward to talking to you next week.